Good evening and welcome to The Checkpoint. My name is Daron Bartlett, and today we're going to be looking at the economy of Uganda. But how, in the perspective we're going to use the report of the World Bank that it released some week ago here at Uma grounds there. Now, what happened is that Uganda has been a part of common markets, which we all know. One of them is the East African Common Market, and we also have the COMESA market. But I know most of you have been hearing about the African Continental Free Trade Area. That means that the 55 countries come together and have a common understanding on free movement and goods. But I'm not in the studio alone. I am with Rachael Sebudde, who is a senior economist at the World Bank. Welcome, Rachael. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Daron, and good evening.
Thank you for sparing some time in this Christmas season to come and talk to us about the World Bank. So let's start with this. What is the World Bank to begin with? Well,
the World Bank is a development finance institution, one of the biggest sources of finance, as well as knowledge about development in the world. Currently, it's made up of 5 institutions, but we must remember that it was set up sometime in the 1940s, immediately after the Second World War, to support development, reconstruction, and so on and so forth. So currently, the World Bank Group is made up of 5 institutions. This comprising of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, the International Development Association, IDA, the multilateral, the International Finance Corporation, IFC. I'm mentioning those abbreviations because many of you know them by that. The Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MEGA, and the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. The World Bank, the World Bank, refers to 2 of those institutions, and that is the IBRD, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and then the International Development Association. And Uganda is benefiting from many of these, but on the development finance side, it is mainly associated with the International Development Association. But we know IFC has been here, MEGA has supported Uganda in several ways, so we are benefiting from almost all of them.
Can you point out if, maybe some of the projects that the World Bank is carrying out in Uganda?
Well, the World Bank is quite big. In terms of portfolio, it has a portfolio of 5.8 currently, 5.8 billion US dollars. And those are spread across a number of projects in the infrastructure areas. We can talk of the known ones in Kampala Institutional Development Project, which is KIDIP. Many people know it as that. That has been working on the several infrastructure institution building within Kampala. We have the national water support that is supporting water development. We have projects in agriculture, in transport. We are spread in a number of areas, and mainly to support development.
Yeah, I asked that because most of us, or most of the viewers, in the beginning they used to think World Bank is the one that brings together all these commercial banks, which isn't, the truth. Later on we found out that it's actually a different organization that does different things, and then what do we benefit from the World Bank? And clearly you state that you help in the development of infrastructure and so on and so forth. But last week you released a report. The World Bank released the report on and also put out some interesting statistics, and also what benefits that Uganda would benefit from the African Continental Free Trade. Could you please highlight for us some of the key things that you find that came out in that report about the economy of Uganda?
Okay, with respect to the economy, thank God the economy has been doing well, at least in the as far as last financial year is concerned. When the economy was fully opened up, there had been gradual opening, but when it fully opened up, that was a major boost to the economy. So we saw growth coming to 4.7% of GDP, according to the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. And that was compared to the previous financial year, which was 3.7. Remember the effects of COVID and all that. But there was a jump to 4.7 into the financial year that ended June 2022. That also was much higher than what we had estimated the economy would turn out to be in the previous economic update, where we thought the growth would be about 3.7. So there was a big boost on account of the reopening. Many services came back, education came back, the industry started growing, and so there was a big boost, and we ended up with a very comfortable level of growth, including supporting even the consumption levels. But into this financial year, we have had a number of shocks, mainly new shocks. We saw the global economy itself, which Uganda depends on quite heavily. The global economy starting to slow down with a lot of shocks. The financial markets tightening because inflation was increasing, mainly because of the increases in the commodity prices, and Uganda is not immune to that. We've seen oil prices increasing very fast, and most importantly, inflation. All that fed into inflation, and inflation started going up. Uganda is known to have been one of those countries that has managed inflation very well, and most of the time very close to the target that the central bank sets itself to. But this time around, we've seen inflation go up to 10%. And that has forced the central bank, that was in a sort of accommodative mode to support recovery, to support growth, start to tighten. And that means trying to withdraw the amount of money that is in the system, so that it doesn't feed into even higher prices. We must say we also highlight the difficult balance that the central bank government in general, or policies in general, are faced with, because much as there is inflation, the economy had started recovering, yet you have to withdraw money, you have to raise the cost of cost of finance, and that fits into business activities and likely to affect economic activity. So that they have to do that delicate balance, and at the same time, the fiscal policy, or what we call the operations of government, also have been trying to cut back or reduce a little bit, so that they can, first of all, not escalate the debt situation in the country, and make sure that they go back to the normal. Because, as you recall, the debt levels had increased quite fast, mainly because of the COVID crisis. So you have a situation where you have the policies have to get into the mode of cutting back and reducing the money in circulation, and making sure that they don't escalate the instabilities, don't escalate the debt, and yet they have also to support economic activity. So that's a delicate balance that has to be maintained, and that is pointed out. As far as, maybe let me also talk about the outlook. Before you ask the question. Yeah, the outlook in our report suggests that the recovery, much as there are these challenges, the recovery will continue. And
sorry about that.
And this financial year, we are expecting growth to be about 5 to 5.5%, and that is, a growth compared to 4.7 in the previous financial year. Much of this is supported by increased investments. FDI, foreign direct investment, has continued to flow. Thank God, because of the oil increased activity towards getting to oil production that has helped some of the FDIs to continue flowing. But also in general, because of the momentum that had been built, we expect that to continue into this, to have been continuing into this financial year, and the economy to maneuver those shocks and be able to grow at 5.5%.
Okay, I'm going to have to take you to the African continental free trade area. Mm-hmm. You point out in the report the benefits that Uganda is likely to get, and when finally it is open and it's implemented. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I see in the report is that Uganda will likely to promote its exports, especially when it comes to things like agricultural products. Mm-hmm. Do you, when you talk about agricultural products, Uganda being able to export, their maize and all these other things that it's able to export, we are likely to export milk also in future. And do you consider effects such as climate change, that it is going to slow down on agriculture and other factors to get such projections and benefits that we may benefit from the African free trade?
Okay, maybe let me step a little bit back and explain what this Africa free trade area, or remind people what this is. This is an ambitious program of regional integration that is covering now the entire continent. We've had many different groupings across the continent. There are some in West Africa, in East Africa. We have the East African community, we have the Eastern Southern Africa with the COMESA, and so on and so forth. But this is now covering the entire continent.
Whole Africa, bringing together ECOWAS, SADC.
Everyone into the same basket. It's quite ambitious, but it's also raises a lot of opportunities for countries that can help countries grow and incomes grow. It first came in effect in Uganda ratified to this in 2018 in November, and as of today, I think 44 countries have already ratified. So that means a number of other countries, like 11, are still yet to ratify. But once they all come on board, the benefits are quite enormous. I have some numbers here, like for example, 30 million people are expected to be pulled out of poverty, and about extreme poverty, and
in
about
Uganda.
No. 30 million across the continent. The continent. Yeah, about 68 million could be lifted out of moderate poverty, and better opportunities for unskilled workers and women could be also attained. In terms of income, 450 billion in income gains, and part of this is because of tariff liberalization. The other part is on account of non-tariff barrier or measures liberalization, removing all these non-tariff barriers that have been affecting trade. So in total, if we do work on trade facilitation and non-tariff barrier liberalization, we'll see incomes grow by 7% across the continent. Those are quite big numbers. In terms of exports, we are expecting $560 billion as increase in African exports. Trading between ourselves within Africa would raise exports by 81%. So that means you are looking at a situation where instead of my neighbor or my fellow African country like Ghana or Tanzania buying their goods from China or Europe, they can get some of these goods from inside within the continent. That's the intra-trade that has the biggest potential to actually raise trade on the continent.
When you talk about intra-trade within Africa itself, many a times it has looked like it's a dream. That's what I would want to assume, because look at Congo, they buy a kilogram of meat at about 30,000 Ugandan shillings and offers. And where do they get it from? They get it from Turkey. Uganda is well known to have quite a lot of cattle. We export milk to that point. It means that we can actually feed places like Congo with enough milk and beef. We have so many challenges within the East African community itself that implementing some of the agreements itself is a challenge. How are we going to achieve this if we still don't see the opportunities in the neighborhood, but also find challenges in implementing the small agreements that we have within the markets, the common markets we already have, like the East African common market?
That's why we say, that's a very good point, because that's why we say that there has been challenges in terms of implementing even the small groupings that we've been in. But now with this bigger grouping, I think the challenge has multiplied several times. It is not easy, but we just have to realize the benefits are enormous and have to work on those challenges. What are some of the issues that have stopped us? Sometimes it's the politics, you can't work with a neighbor because of ABC. But beyond politics, we haven't come together to, for example, what stops trade from happening between Uganda and DRC, for example. It is the trade facilitation. It is the transport cost. It is the, the different customs, arrangements that we have that turn out to be a barrier to trade. So we have to open our eyes and work on these issues. Maybe we can start thinking of regional public goods, for example. Instead of each country thinking of, I have to build my roads, now we have to think, how do I get my goods from here to Ghana, for example? Do I require a rail? Do I require a road network that is working perfectly? Because, the continent might look big, but as soon as you have the transport, the facilitation to move around, then it becomes easy to traverse across the continent and be able to carry the goods. Open up any other barriers that stop maybe people from movement, services from crossing. In the report, we also highlight the thick borders. Those thick borders between the countries have to be broken down, and these are some of the things that I'm talking about that contribute to the thickening of the borders between each of our countries. There are no roads. There are, if you try to move from one place to another, the transport costs are so high, or even the barriers because you need a visa, for example.
To move within Africa itself.
Exactly, and you pay for, very highly. Some of the countries, was in some of the discussions, and someone was mentioning $200 for a visa. And even just getting the visa doesn't stop at paying that $200, but it has other costs around it. Once you are supposed to pay something to someone, you have to walk there, you have to spend time, you have to fill forms, you have to facilitate people sometimes,
it's actually interesting, but a reality that it's more expensive to go to Kenya than going to Dubai if you're to buy an air ticket.
Yes.
So you would rather go to Dubai than go to Kenya.
Yes.
And we are in the same market.
Yes, and for many of the countries, you actually have to go to Europe before you can arrive back in Africa. Yes.
It's a sad one there. Yeah. So when you look at the challenges we have as Uganda, and our possibilities to be able to contribute and achieve the dream of the African free continental trade area, do we have what it takes to meet all our agreements and protocols of the African free trade continent, Africa trade area?
We do have what it takes. It takes commitment. Whatever challenge is there, it takes commitment. It can be a very high mountain to climb, but you go step by step. So long as you're committed to get there, you'll get there. Because Many of these other regional blocks, it is not that they were made that way. It is consistent and determination to agree to, some of the steps that have been put in place. We need a roadmap. The other day we were in a workshop. Actually, government has moved very fast in this on this agenda. We should commend it, and they are working on a roadmap or a strategy of how do we actually get this agenda moving forward. So that roadmap should not stay on paper. If you have a roadmap, there has to be a consistent approach to implementing the roadmap, and then we'll be able to get there because the opportunities are enormous.
Okay.
Yeah.
As of now, what would you think, as an economist, why do you think Uganda is not exporting, and why is it importing more than we're not supposed to, and why are we not exporting as much as we should do?
I think it goes back to the issues that we have talked about already. One, the high transport costs of exporting, even if it's within a near neighbor, but also even if you are taking it out of the country, the transport costs are quite high. The second one is the issue of standards and quality. We talk about the potential of agriculture, but agriculture is not like manufacturing where you are supposed to produce an exercise book. It is this length and that, so you just churn that out on the production line. In agriculture, extra effort has to be made to produce standard goods. If, for example, a certain market wants pineapples of a certain size, you have to be able to adjust the ingredients so that you can meet that quality. And consistently, whether it rained or it didn't rain, you should be able to produce. That means investing in irrigation. You talked about climate change. I think we didn't expound on that. Irrigation, so that there is consistent production. Making sure that there are, affordable inputs like fertilizers and varieties that meet the standards, and then being able to process those products. For example, even if it's as simple as packaging, packaging can be a very big barrier between the markets that you are trying to get to and you, the producer. So I talk a lot about agriculture because that's the highest potential for the country, but we also have to move into value addition, because it is not fair, should I say fair, for the country to be producing all these commodities and selling them at a very low price when we can actually process, create employment for the rest of the population, but also get a much higher value out of the products, say coffee, cotton, processing and getting to the next level of nearer to what the consumer actually consumes is the best way to go. And then Uganda can be able to move its exports to the next level. I've talked about transport, quality and standardization. There are also issues of sanitary and phytosanitary issues that have faced some of our exports, like coffee, like maize, like fish, like horticulture. If you've been following in the media, many of these have been affected by these, issues of standards and health standards. So we have to invest in those and make sure that our goods meet the international standards. Not only international for the sake of international, but also our health, even domestically, is affected by eating wrong, products that are infected with materials that are not supposed to be consumed.
When I asked about climate change, I was coming from a point where we've seen a report from the UN where it says about 3 million Kenyans, no, sorry, I'm going to be mixing countries here and there. Kenyans, 3 million Kenyans are likely to get into poverty because of the drought and the famine that they are facing in the northern part of Kenya. We see Uganda, some parts of the north having climate effect change, not only being hot, but also consistent rains that destroy crops here and there. We've seen it here, people dying in floods, crops are being killed. So I just wanted to understand how the projection, what was the baseline of this projection? Did it factor in issues like climate change? Because it can easily change everything here, since it's climate change. The projection, like you had projected the economy of Uganda to grow at a certain pace, but it went over and above. Is there sort of a possibility that it can actually go down?
Yes. Yeah, actually in the report, some of the risks that we point out relate to weather shocks, climate change issues. But generally speaking, climate change is a major issue today. And if you are talking about agriculture, we have to encourage and invest into climate smart approaches to agriculture. Some of these are not actually high technology, high cost investments, but the farmers have to know about them and be able to implement them so that they can manage farming in an environment where you have lots of climate change. Then in terms of larger investments, it means making sure that there is irrigation. I think I've talked about that already, irrigation. But there are also climate resistant varieties for some of the products that are produced in agriculture. So research is still very important to make sure that research goes on and we can get that varieties that have been found by the researchers onto the farm. So it's a long chain of investment and making sure that it reaches the farmer to make sure that we can adapt to climate change, because we know it is going to be increasing. Adapt and manage the way we do business or the way we do agriculture in order to manage the shocks that are coming on board.
All right, thank you. Lastly, you talk about external shocks that threaten Uganda's economy resilience here in the report. I can see it here. It says that real GDP is projected to grow by 5.5% during the financial year of 2023 and by about 6% in the financial year 2024. How do you come about these figures, and what will contribute to the growth of the economy to this percentage here?
Yeah, we see that, as I mentioned, the momentum that has been built will continue, but this is mainly because of if the business environment continues to improve and the private sector continues investing, because much of this growth actually depends on what the private sector does at the end of the day. So we see investments stepping up a little bit, and also on account of the oil sector, we've seen a lot of investments coming from abroad to support this investment locally. So those are some of the factors that we looked at in terms of coming up with the numbers that we have on the table. Other positive developments is we also realized that much as the central bank has been tightening, inflation had started coming down, and the major driver, which is commodity prices, by the time we released the report, the commodity prices had started coming down, and then even projections of a recession the global recession had sort of taken a back seat, and now the talk is about slower growth. Okay. So if the global economy doesn't slow down as much as as had been anticipated, then that is a positive development for Uganda. The demand at the global economy supports Uganda's growth through exports. It also helps to, to make sure that imports can flow easily to support the activities for those who depend on imports. And for agriculture, we also expected that a number of areas have started working very well. For example, coffee. Coffee has been doing very well and contributed quite a lot to the previous year's improvement. So we expected that growth will continue in the agriculture sector. But we don't just stop at expecting, we also point out the risks. These, if you assume things are going to go well, those are the growth rates, but there are also risks that could affect this outcome.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for sparing some time and coming to check on us and have this conversation about the economy of Uganda. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching The Checkpoint. For now, we'll say good night. We'll see you next week.